2023. Wow. We only know some of like the first 3 months of those games' releases, but damn, already, especially after those latest presentations from Sony and Nintendo. 2022 is no slouch, and I spent the bulk of 2021 hyping up 2022 because 2021 had barely any hits, but I was convinced 2022 would deliver, and it definitely has, leagues better than 2021. But 2023, man, here's some perspective. I love when a 1 month window absolutely slays. I like when there's so many banger games in a short enough time period that you literally do not have time to play them all. 2022 delivered that from the end of January to the end of February with Pokemon Legends Arceus, Dying Light 2, Horizon Forbidden West, and Elden Ring all coming out within that time. That's a huge 28-day period that I'm not sure has ever been topped as far as big quality releases in a short time frame goes. I really like all four of those games, and all four of those games were the kind of big hype monsters people would specifically save up money to buy. 2023's answer to this exact same time period is already comparable, and we don't even know half the other games that are going to come out in that window because it's still so far out. But what we already have is Fire Emblem Engage, the Dead Space remake, Forspoken, Dead Island 2, Hogwarts Legacy, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe if you're into that, and Octopath Traveler 2 if you're into that. That's all from January 20th to February 24th. That is simply massive. Now, any of these games could get delayed, but that lineup is the stuff of legends. And on the other side of the coin, any anticipated titles already announced or that are yet to be announced could still land a spot in that time frame too. We're still waiting on release dates for Starfield, Hollow Knight Silksong, Breath of the Wild 2, which I guess we should start calling Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, Suicide Squad, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and a bunch of others. I want to talk about some upcoming games in more detail a bit later. I guess the reason I'm already looking ahead to 2023 is because 2022 in my mind has already succeeded its mission of being a good year. Honestly, it succeeded that shit in February, and everything else has just been extra credit. But it's also winding down as far as my own personal interest is concerned, and I think the new Saints Row is the start of a downward slump we're gonna have to get through before God of War Ragnarok brings it roaring back to life. Like you've heard all over the internet already, unless you only read reviews from Game Informer, who are swiftly deteriorating into nothingness before our very eyes, the new Saints Row was a straight shot of garbage with no chaser. That's a game that was supposed to be good. It was never gonna be, based on how it presented and what it showed us every step of the way leading up to release, outside of its in-depth character creator being wasted on such an insult of a game. But there were stakes here. This game not being good had consequences. That's not always the case. Sometimes you can make a bad game and nobody cares because there's no ramifications, especially when it's a new IP or something you're not making a franchise out of. But when you butcher and besmirch and bastardize an established franchise, you might just kill the damn franchise, which is what it feels like happened with Saints Row. A Saints Row game was literally afraid to offend people. That is the absolute state of the culture war, by the way. There was a store named Rim Jobs, and they changed the name to not offend. Who exactly? Like, show me one person who cared. And if you can find them, please tell them to redo their childhood and have people bully them harder. Saints Row going politically correct is like South Park going politically correct, in case you weren't sure how far the mighty have fallen. And besides the writing, the game itself was just cookie-cutter, boring, unrefined third-person action ripped straight out of an early 2000s time capsule, so it sucked on top of being an abomination. Now, the reason I say this is the start of a downward trend and not an isolated incident is because I've been paying attention to how Gotham Knights is coming along, and I am devastatingly disappointed. That game comes out in less than a month, and it reminds me of Saints Row, an already established franchise that used to be cool, the Batman Arkham games, reduced to a messy, lower-tier game. Gotham Knights won't have the content issue, presumably, but the gameplay and mechanics just look noticeably worse than the games that pioneered it over a decade ago. And how do you do that? How do you make PS5 Gotham Knights look worse than PS3 Arkham City? How do you make the combat look clunkier and less satisfying? Rocksteady isn't doing this one because they're working on Suicide Squad instead, and I guess that's going to be the good one. The developer matters so hard sometimes. You really can't oversell it. If Rocksteady was doing Gotham Knights from the jump, it would be in contention for Game of the Goddamn Year, and if it was as good as I envision it under those circumstances, if it truly evoked the perfect nature of Arkham City, the greatest superhero game of all time, it would win outright, no contest. Instead, we get the bad ending, like we got with Saints Row. It sucks when you can see how a game could have turned out differently, when you can perfectly imagine what it would have looked and felt like if it had been good instead, or just better. October 2022 is going to be a slump month full of mediocre games. In addition to Gotham Knights, there's Scorn, that horror sex nightmare FPS puzzle game that's going to be boring AF, despite all the penis monsters everywhere. Scorn makes me never want to think about intercourse again. Every flesh monster and contraption is designed to look like genitalia from hell. Imagine what a scarred, barren womb looks like from the inside. That's your pleasant backdrop for this disgusting game. But even with all the morbid intrigue of looking at bloody, pulsating vulvas all over the place, the trailers can't hide how boring and tedious it's all going to be to navigate and go through the motions. Guarantee it gets 7s out of 10 at best before Game Informer gives it a 9 as they go out of business. Luckily, it'll be free on Game Pass, so I can puke every 10 minutes at no extra charge. Then there's Overwatch 2, which comes out October 4th, which is like 2 weeks away, and I haven't heard a damn peep from anybody. This game's gonna have a quieter launch than a rocket ship full of deaf people, and it's warranted because it really feels like it's just a new season of Overwatch. They'll drop a few new roster additions, and then it's business as usual for people who still play a franchise that doesn't innovate beyond changing the monikers of the characters they named after developer sex pests. New Tales from the Borderlands, October 21st. Show me one person who fucking asked. Where's the one guy that's like, yeah, I love Borderlands for the story and lore? Launches the same day as Gotham Knights, Scorn, and the next-gen upgrade of Persona 5 Royal, a day after Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which is another game that doesn't matter to me. Kingdom Battle, the first one, is like the only Mario game in history to ever drop to $20 in a sale. Nintendo treats putting Mario on sale like it's putting him in the back of the closet, symbolically shelving him forever. This dude Mario doesn't know what a sale is, because Nintendo would never do that to their #1 mascot, and yet they did it for Kingdom Battle, a game that also stars a bunch of mangy, stupid rabbit monsters that served as inspiration for the minions, which is not a compliment. But it plays like XCOM. As an XCOM fan, don't you ever say that to me again. Tell me Lords of the Fallen is goated because it plays like Dark Souls. I dare you. I'm looking at the full list of October games updated as of September 22nd, and the only things that look even halfway decent are Saturnalia, which is like a horror roguelike thing with a cool art style, and Bayonetta 3, which is Bayonetta 3. Resident Evil Village is getting DLC 2, which is probably neat, but it's not a game. Oh, and you have Call of Duty on the 28th. If it's the year 2008 and you're still hyped for shit like that, I say as I eagerly anticipate Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in November. Self-awareness doesn't excuse hypocrisy, but it does help. Also, I do fervently believe Pokemon needs to act like the billion-dollar franchise it is and step it the hell up. November. Things are looking up in November. And down, but more up than down. November 8th, you've got Skull and Bones, which looks like Sea of Thieves, except they have upgrades and progression, so there's a reason to do anything. I played Sea of Thieves for 15 hours, and I was the same pirate in the end that I was in the beginning, just with a different outfit and a paint job for my banjo. Everything in that game is cosmetic, so nothing matters. You collect treasures, so you can trade them for gold, so you can buy colors, and that's it. You don't get stronger, you don't get better equipment. You're like a guy who goes to the gym for a year and reaps 0 gains. Skull and Bones, from the gameplay explanations I've seen, has upgrades and progression, so it's already a banger waiting to happen if they execute everything else properly. It comes out the same day as Sonic Frontiers. Dude, Sonic fans have been on copium for like 20 years. You'd think some of them would get a grip, but I'm pretty sure they're just addicted to it. If a Sonic game gets an overall 6 out of 10, they're out celebrating in the streets and pissing on cop cars. Sonic Frontiers takes a barren open-world landscape and just randomly drops a cluttered mess of rings and bounce pads and loop-de-loops in there with no rhyme or reason behind it. Like, I've seen the initial gameplay trailer, and I've seen subsequent gameplay trailers. People think the subsequent ones fixed it. Nah, dude, they're just obfuscating it better. Don't be fooled by a green screen pretending to be a gorgeous vista. Sonic Frontiers is going to feel just as lifeless as it looked initially once you have free control of the camera and the joy of hopping across floating debris wears off in 3 minutes. Probably a solid 40% of the gameplay in this game is just going to be running around in a circle, because they highlighted that as the main method of solving puzzles and killing certain enemies. Face it, you're getting Balan Wonderworlded again, only this time it was more obvious from the start and there's no pretty cutscenes to fall back on. Both these games come out a day before God of War Ragnarok. LOL. Dig 2 graves and give Kratos the shovel. I like Skull and Bones, but you're gonna be Skull and Bones with a release date like that. RIP. If you ask the average person what their most anticipated game is of 2022, it's gonna be God of War Ragnarok. And yes, it's a boring answer, but it's only boring because it's the correct answer. I think I personally will probably have more fun overall with Pokemon as a lifelong Pokemon fan, but there's no question Ragnarok is the better game. And as far as big games go, it's pretty much all that's left for 2022. All I need from Ragnarok is the same general action from God of War 2018, but with actually good boss fights that don't suck ass, where half of them are just the same troll in a different cosplay. You make this thing as foundationally solid as recent God of War, but with the boss fights and pure spectacle of old God of War, you got a 10 out of 10 game like you used to get back in the good old days. I heard some background lore explanation once of like, oh, Kratos is massively holding back most of his power in 2018 because he doesn't want his son to know he's a god. Well, it ain't fucking fun to hold back power. So now that his son does know he's a god, I better see mountains being torn apart again. None of this, wow, my dad's really strong, he can lift a big log. Like, get the hell out of here, and don't come back until you're carrying the entire ocean on your back. Go Simulator 3 comes out November 17th, a day before Pokemon. Gee, I wonder which one I should get if I'm on a budget. I hate meme games. I really do. I don't enjoy what they do to pop culture. Untitled Goose Game in 2019 was the last one I saw where I was like, this is quite literally stupid. Why does anyone like this? You're a goose who steals people's keys and plays pranks on them. I bet that's fun for 8 hours. Games like this make me hate YouTubers because they wouldn't exist without us. YouTubers dictate gaming culture far too much for my liking. It's neat when you're showcasing a good indie game, but then something like Goat Simulator 3 takes over the airwaves and drowns out cool things with a tsunami of bullshit. But good game-wise, November has God of War, Pokemon, Skull and Bones, Evil West, which is a third-person electropunk one-man army vampire slayer that looks pretty good that I just saw today, and the latest Dark Pictures anthology game, The Devil in Me, which I think is going to be their best one because it takes place in a murder hotel with death traps, and that's just fun. So that's a pretty solid month. Finally, December, which isn't super filled out yet, but the only notable game I feel like talking about is High on Life. It's the Rick and Morty game that isn't a Rick and Morty game. The one where the guns talk and the game makes fun of gaming tropes while eagerly participating in said gaming tropes. It's the game where everyone either sounds like, hey, I'm a little unsure about this, and that's the entire crux of my personality, or, hey, I'm gonna take a shit on your couch, is that cool? High on Life's humor could be described as a more analytically gratuitous Borderlands. Like, all the jokes are just about mentally dissecting whatever's currently happening until there's nothing left and you've run it into the goddamn ground. And it's wacky and vulgar and OMG random. I watched a 25-minute gameplay showcase, and I absolutely can't stand when any character opens their mouth, because odds are they're not gonna shut it again for a while. This style of humor makes me physically ill. That said, the gameplay still looks fun. FPS, mission structure, kinda sandboxy, and it's gonna be free on Game Pass, so I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm gonna have to invest in a pair of noise-canceling headphones that cancel the noise coming out of the headphones. Well, that's gonna do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino. Watch every video I've ever made and write a think piece about each one, and I'll see you guys next time.